Right. You've got to say, I'm serious about my idea for you to take it seriously. Like, I've got to put something in the game, some skin in the game. Like, the number of times that I went out over the last, actually really since I left Reebok and tried to like just get a prototype of a shoe done from a factory that I had an idea for and spent money out of my pocket to do it. But it was like, cause it was worth pursuing, and finally it like hit with Flux where we went, okay, it's not just, and the big thing for me was it's not just me, because I know that I had tried that bit before and I knew that I couldn't do it by myself.
Welcome to the Zero Quit Podcast, where we bring you inside the minds of elite athletes, business owners, specialists, and other creatives. I'm your host, Brock Covington, and through these conversations, you'll hear practical advice and effective strategies for optimizing not only your performance, but also your habits and routines as well. If you enjoy the show, be sure to subscribe and share it with a friend. What's going on, guys? Welcome to today's podcast. After a whole tire repair and more later, we finally get the podcast rolling. I'm fortunate to have this podcast done in person with Mr. Zach Frey. He is a footwear designer and entrepreneur based in Denver, Colorado. He's designed for brands such as Puma, Reebok, in addition to launching his own company, Flux Footwear, in 2020. What's going on, man?
What's up? Thanks for having me.
Of course. I feel like it was a wild way to kind of get to know each other, but almost it's like the most natural, authentic way is, I pull up, driving through some snow, and then, for the first time in my life, have a hole in my tire. And then luckily there's a spot down the way, got it patched up, and now we're here.
Yeah, that was a big hole too.
Yeah, well, it was I wish I can pop a picture on the screen or something like that. It wasn't just a nail. It was like this curved, almost like carabiner piece of metal. Anyway, got real lucky about that. But anyway, happy to have you on and talk about Flux Footwear, and then also just kind of all the things that you're doing. So how did you get involved in the first place with interest in shoes and graphic design? Because obviously, or not obviously, but you've worked with multiple footwear brands, but also you do some graphic design. I don't know if you still currently do it, but you definitely did in the past, from my understanding. So how did you kind of get into the creative side of things and graphic design, and specifically with footwear?
Yeah, I remember I went through sort of like drawing obsessions as a kid. My parents always had me in like drawing classes. That was like kind of the thing that I really enjoyed doing as a kid. And so I remember when I was probably 12, if anybody remembers the Nike Mercurial Vapor soccer shoe, I was playing soccer and this shoe came out, and it was like, they got me with all of the marketing lingo, the materials, the color. You have to find a picture of this, because it was like this iridescent brown, and nobody was making brown soccer shoes. And just the spikes on this thing, everything about that shoe was awesome. And so it like sparked this moment of real joy for me to like sit down and draw soccer shoes. And I don't know what it was, but I kind of just kept drawing shoes. And then
were shoes like the origin of just your kind of creative design in general? It was kind of like intertwined from the start? Or did you have interest in designing, I don't know, logos, other branding stuff, other creativity?
Yeah, before drawing shoes, my other objects of interest were like, I was into drawing watches, I was into drawing cars. It was like whatever the thing that a little kid might have an interest in for however long.
It kind of reminds me, you seen Superbad?
Yes.
You know the scene I'm talking about where he's just drawing dicks?
Oh.
All the time in the lunchbox.
Yes.
That's what I'm visualizing, but shoes.
Yeah, basically, and I would at school, I would draw. I would spend my time in math class. I remember distinctly my freshman year of high school drawing soccer jerseys.
Yeah.
That was what it was. And I was like designing kits, and my math teacher was like, dude, you're not doing well in this class. Why are you drawing right now? But it was like, that was the way. I don't know. Honestly, I wish that I had found something maybe more like, I don't know, helpful to the world to like fascinate myself with. But maybe we'll get into it. Hopefully we're finding ways to do that, and take this like really obscure obsession and maybe turn it into something useful for people.
Well, let's dive into it. So with Flux specifically, I want to ask first where the name came from, because the first thing that came to mind was flux capacitor from Back to the Future, and that's it?
No, that's not it.
Man.
No, but that also, yes.
Because the logo almost looks like.
I know. I kind of want to have a shoe called the Flux Capacitor. No, so actually, the name Flux was there before I came on. Isaac and Ben, the original two co-founders, had started another company that was doing corporate health and wellness, VO2 max testing, and they were like, "Hey, why don't we do shoes? That sounds like an interesting thing to try out." So they found me and I freelanced for them initially. But I believe Flux comes from, there's a book that's called, I've got it somewhere. The Inevitable. I see it right there.
Well, the other thing I wrote down that I've heard flux incorporated before is from a pre-Socratic philosopher, Heraclitus, would talk about flux, that things are like always in flux. Life is always in flux and change. Is that it? Go ahead, grab it. All right, I think we got the book now.
Yeah, this is okay. So this book is called The Inevitable, and it's like all the tech stuff that's going to happen in the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
And he says every kind of thing is becoming something else. While it turns from might to is, all is flux. The engines of flux are now more important than products. So like it's this idea that, and here we are making a product, but the idea is that
constant innovation.
Yeah, like the tools that we have at our disposal today are so much greater than they were even 10 years ago, even 2 months ago. Like we've got ChatGPT now,
yeah,
and like
scary.
So yeah, like we have our products, but we're also having to figure out how to innovate to keep ahead.
Yeah.
Beyond just that. So. There you go.
Flux.
So but yeah, flux. Life is in flux. And I think like the I'm getting excited. I think like the core ethos for our brand is that like idea of constant self-improvement.
Yeah. And
we're finding that that's like, that resonates with our audience, and like the product is sort of an embodiment of that. It's like something we're calling, effortless biohacking. This idea that you can like just make really easy changes in your life, like efficient changes that have really massive effects on your well-being.
Yeah. And nothing can be, to tie into that, nothing can be stationary, right? Our health isn't stationary. So I think you do need to constantly be thinking about how can we leverage technology to improve our health? How can, on a basic level, even, shoe wear, footwear, how could we leverage this to improve our life and to improve our health and improve how our body moves and shapes and things like that? So that makes perfect sense. With the origins of that, so you come on, I guess, a little bit later, but at that point, had they developed any shoes yet, or were you kind of brought on to help develop the shoes?
Yes and no. So this is the interesting thing, and this is how I knew that these guys were serious, is that they had gone to China and they had actually produced. Well, so I don't know if you're familiar with a shoe called the Feiyu. It's like it's a Chinese or French, depending on there's actually two different versions of it. One's made in China and one I think is made in France, or it's owned by a French company, but it's like a martial arts shoe. And actually I had a friend once walk into my house while I was testing them out, and she's from China. She's like, "Why do you have those shoes? Those are like poor people shoes. Those are like, nobody has, those are not cool shoes." And I was like, well, they thought they were cool enough to take this shoe, and they are. You'll see them on people who, it's like a $40 shoe, right? So it's, and it's a good shoe that people are using for martial arts. And they said, well, why don't we just like rebrand it and put our logo on it and make it our thing? And I was like, so they bought like, I think 500 pairs of shoes or something, and we're selling them to their friends, and they probably still have them in a bag somewhere. And I looked at it and I was like, well, this is cool, guys, but we've got to, if you want to be taken seriously as a shoe brand, we've got to innovate ourselves. Like we can't just
well, that happens a lot with, my wife was just showing me another influence on Instagram that's basically just slapping her logo on a pair of leggings. And it happens a lot with hats. Are you familiar with Melon, that brand?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's so many brands. You can go on Alibaba right now and type in like Melon hat and slap your logo on. It's the same look, same design, whatever. And obviously people are doing it with shoes, people are doing it with the shirts, shorts, everything like that. And so all it kind of takes is like, yeah, one brand to do something that's successful, and then people just want to take it. But it's good that you kind of point out like, hey, we kind of need to carve our own path into this.
Yeah, I think there's a time and place for saying, hey, this is a good design, and like let's whatever. If that's not what your thing is, right?
Okay.
Like if your thing isn't being a legging wear company, but your brand is like, oh, my people might want my logo on these pants, fine. Like great, it's out there. But if you want to be taken seriously as like, if you want to do something meaningful in an industry, you have to innovate. And I think that's where we looked at, what we were doing with Flux. And when I came in as a freelancer, I was like, guys, like there's major opportunity here. And sort of back to part of my story was when I was in college, I started getting interested. This is like 10 years ago. Me and my roommate tried to start a barefoot casual footwear company. We didn't have the skills, the resources, or the industry understanding to do anything with it at the time. But like all of a sudden it sparked for me something that had been latent for years, that was, we can do better. Like our shoes can be better. They can move better with our feet, and they don't need to look weird or out there, which is one of the major issues that people face in our industry is like customers want a shoe that looks good, that looks fashionable, but that's also really good for their feet. And those two things don't need to be exclusive.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. And I guess when you're doing that, as you're kind of getting started with this, how did you begin to leverage that experience? And I guess you can kind of walk us back to, how did you get working with Puma, Reebok, Wolf & Shepherd, these different companies you've worked with? How did you get involved with them from the first place? How did you go from drawing, I guess, to actually working with these companies? And then you could maybe wind in that experience to how you approach designing for Flux.
Yeah. I'm going to try and be as concise as possible. I studied design in college. I really was originally very curious about studying industrial design, which is what most of my contemporaries in footwear design went through. But I just didn't have peace about any of the schools that I was looking at to do that at. And so I ended up at a small liberal arts college north of Boston and studied basically art and graphic design, which it was kind of a broad degree, and it was a liberal arts college, so you're learning not just like how to be a really proficient designer, but you're also learning how to think about things more broadly, which I think has probably helped a lot in kind of like who I've become as an entrepreneur. And that was one of the things early on that people said as I was looking at some of these art schools. One guy in particular who I was going to play soccer at this art school, and I thought that's what I was going to do. And he was like, dude, after I spent like the weekend there, he goes, if you want to do something other than just be an artist, like, I don't think this school's for you. Because I was probably going off on like all the whatever ideas I had in my head at the time as a senior in high school. And he could see like, dude, you need something broader than this. And so, and in kind of a weird turn of events, I just like totally like wrote off, I'm never going to design shoes, because I thought, well, I've just chosen a different road. Yeah. And studied graphic design. Had a great teacher. I learned the programs and learned like that. I don't know. I just had enough of a passion still for like fashion or sort of like physical design. And I ended up getting an internship at Puma. And they just, I don't know if they just like, honestly, it felt like a gift. It really was a gift. That gave me the understanding, at least, then go on and get an apprenticeship at Reebok. They also had a really good program,
So
very dedicated.
To pause you,
program.
when you were at Puma, as you kind of, because it seemed like you were teeter-tottering on still pursuing this footwear and design, I guess, endeavor. And then when you got this opportunity at Puma, after a month or two working there, was there like a click where you were like, this is what I want to do? Or
Dude, the first day I walked in there and I was like the day I went in, actually I bombed my first interview there, by the way, because I was so excited and I think I was like too eager, you know. I don't know if like the people who interviewed me would say that was what ultimately why they didn't give me the first internship, but like I was like, holy shit, this place is amazing. There's shoes everywhere. There's so much creativity here. The possibilities are endless. Like it was like everything inside of me lit up. And so that I think it was like walking in for the interview, and then I like had to deal with the fact that I got rejected, and then they came back and offered me it. Like literally like a month or two later, they're like, hey, you applied for this internship, and I was like, yeah, I got rejected from it. They're like, no, we actually
did want you.
I ended up on a different team. I had a great mentor there, and
it all worked out.
It totally all worked out. And then Reebok was another one of these things where I actually found out from that college roommate. He was like, when we were trying to, we were thinking about this company we wanted to start, I guess his uncle had worked at Reebok, because it's there in Massachusetts, and so he mentioned like, hey, they've got this really great program, you should apply. I applied, got so lucky. Like I was not as good as any of the people that I was apprenticing with. Like there was like 6 of us footwear design interns or apprentices, and of that group, I'm pretty sure I was the only one who got hired on afterwards. And it wasn't because I was a great designer or had all of the like technical proficiencies. I just worked my ass off and really wanted it. Still looking back, I don't know if I have words for why I wanted it so bad, but it just lit me up, and still does. Like it's
well, that'll carry people a lot further. I mean, some people have talent and excitement, but if things don't go their way or they struggle, or they may not be as eager to work with the team or this or that, then they're going to fall more flat versus someone who's just so passionate. Passion's going to beat talent, 9 times out of 10. I feel like as long as there's some talent to go with it,
you can learn these things. And like that's what I did. I mean, when I was at Reebok, and one of the things that has served me so well since then is like I spent my time down in the sample room with the guys who were like cutting the patterns, who had been there for like 40 years in their career and had been with Reebok since, literally for 40 years. And they were like, yeah, this is how you do this. That's why that can't work. Like I would like get super granular about like any idea that I had and pull anything I could out of them because it was just so fascinating.
Well, the funny thing too about those people is that have been in doing anything, it's the same goes for my experience with gym, ownership and things like that. But the people that have done something for 30, 40 years, whatever it is, they have this intuitive knowledge that, you're not going to get from a textbook. Like you could go to a design school and learn X, Y, Z, but, there's going to be these little intricacies that someone who's been doing it for 30, 40 years that can show you or teach you that they just have an eye for, right?
Right. It's absolutely invaluable, and I'm continue to be extremely grateful that those people were willing to spend time like out of their day to help me. But I think that's also an insight from that is just, especially when you're young, people are so willing to help. If you just ask questions, people really do want to help. So just like keep your ego low.
Yeah, that is a good point. And like the worst thing, someone could say is no, or turn you down, or ignore a DM. But that is something too, like so much, like even with this podcast, sometimes I'm like, like, do I have a certain following account? Like, can I ask this person? Will they be interested? And it's like, worst thing they can do is say no. In the best scenario, you create a relationship with somebody you never met before. You have an amazing conversation. You learn something new, right? So it's always like the possibility and the potential is there. And like, if you don't do anything, then for sure you're not, nothing's going to happen from it, right? So tying back to Flux, you mentioned it a little bit earlier. You hop on with these two co-founders. Something you mentioned was how you knew something was like right about them, about they were in like going in the right direction, because that's something I was nervous about when opening the gym. I opened it with my wife, but I was always, hesitant to consider having any other partners, because it can be very tricky with business partners, right? They may be not as hardworking. They may have poor financial decisions with the business, difficult to work with, all these kinds of things. So I guess walk through that process on how you knew like they were going to fit right, and how you guys delegated who's going to do what and how it all meshed together in a brief sense.
Such a good and timely question.
Yeah.
I also have a lot of questions about what that journey was like
feel free,
for you. And I wonder if we've had similar experiences, but yeah, so I'm trying to organize my thoughts here.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing was I could see that these people were serious because they had gone out and already done something.
Yeah.
The number of times that I, as a freelancer, had talked to people who had never done anything
Just
with
ideas,
their idea,
just talk.
just
Yeah.
ideas,
Yeah.
right? And so you can always do something with an idea. Like minimum viable product is like, if you understand that concept, you can be an entrepreneur. I think like if you really understand that and are willing to take those risks to do it, just to put something out there. And I'm sure that's how this podcast even started. It was probably it's growing. Like today you have 2 cameras where before you're like, I only had 1, right? So you're like constantly making improvements, and you can't be afraid of that.
To almost add on to that and maybe spice myself up a little bit, you have to put out something before you can expect people to perceive the value, right? So like before, like this isn't a Joe Rogan experience, but I'm going for the 2 cameras anyway because I have the opportunity. I'm putting forth the extra effort, of getting these different files, exporting them, rendering them, all of this or that. For the potential outcome, it's the same deal with the MVP. With that minimal viable product is you have to put forth some effort to show. You don't have to get 5,000 units of some, Flux shoes to try and get some investors, but you do need to have that initial prototype or some initial ideas and put them into practice a little bit so that other people can grasp and see that you are serious, right?
Right. You've got to say, I'm serious about my idea for you to take it seriously.
Yeah.
Like I've got to put something in the game, some skin in the game. Like the number of times that I went out over the last, actually really since I left Reebok and tried to like just get a prototype of a shoe done from a factory that I had an idea for and spent money out of my pocket to do it. But it was like, cause it was worth pursuing. And finally it like hit with Flux where we went, okay, it's not just, and the big thing for me was it's not just me. Cause I know that I had tried that bit before and I knew that I couldn't do it by myself. I don't have the business skills to do Flux and to get it where it needs to go. I'm a designer, I'm a creator. And so I got really lucky that I got aligned with some guys who had the skills that complemented mine. And so like to that point, so these guys had Isaac is he was running an Etsy business where he was making custom furniture essentially and was doing really well with that. So he had business acumen, had a background in finance and accounting, and so like I always say, it's like, it's no wonder that Phil Knight had an accountant's background because I watch Isaac do what he does and I'm like, damn dude, like you get this. And if it wasn't you, I don't know how we could do this, sincerely. And Ben came in with more of like tech back end, getting some of our systems running. And actually we've recently found ourselves in a situation where Ben said, hey, I feel like I've taken the business as far as I can take it. I want to step back. So we went through a whole deal there. It's totally resolved. We've so now it's just Isaac and I.
Well, it's powerful to know, though, and you touched on it before, like knowing where your limits are, and that's something that we had to experience. And partly why we ended up like selling the gym was, okay, we were moving, but we acknowledged that we couldn't do this on our own. And honestly, like one lesson I walked away with was I waited too long to delegate. Like we could have delegated. We had the finances to, hire more people and manage it, but it was a small enough gym spot where I was like, well, I can do it all by myself. And I did that too long. And that's like the biggest lesson I learned, and something I've talked to with other entrepreneurs as well that have either successfully delegated or are currently in the process of figuring out how to delegate because they're in the same position that I was in.
I think that's the make or break moment.
Yeah.
And that's actually like we're just now, Isaac and I, starting to delegate.
Yeah.
And I can feel the growing pains of it.
Yeah.
But it's the only way that we go from point B to point C to D.
It's a difference from like startup to like flourishing business, I think.
Totally. And
it's a way to get your life back, because otherwise, you are really working, instead of the 9 to 5, you're working a 5 to 9, and you're just working constantly around the clock, right?
The biggest change in my life over the last 2 years was maybe the moment that I went from running customer service myself to having a team that was running customer service. Like, holy shit. I became such a better person because
it's probably weighing on you.
It was weighing on me constantly. Also, like when you're so close to the product as the person who designed it, and somebody is saying like, I don't like this because of whatever. And you're like, God, I really want you to like it, right? Like I really want you to like the thing that I poured my heart and soul into it. It's like, so, I had to learn so much about disconnecting from my ego around that, because it was really taxing, and also just being so splintered mentally between like putting out fires over here, meanwhile like trying to plan for the future of product 2 years down the road. And
too much.
It's a lot. It was super insightful. I'm really glad that I did it, because I learned a lot from our customers about our product. You're constantly hearing about it, and it does kind of put some fire under your ass to like to make the product improvements, because you don't just hear about it, but you really feel like their disappointment if something's off, or in whether it's the product or the customer experience, the checkout process, whatever. And so we're still learning a lot, but that piece of delegation was massive.
So pull things back to the shoes themselves. Let's get into the design. So we luckily, because you're the designer himself, we got a bunch of prototypes to kind of reference things. But I guess walk me through what makes this shoe unique. What makes it different from, I don't know, like at first look, you're like, okay, rubber sole, blah, blah. Maybe it looks like a Van or some kind of like, low top Converse. What makes this shoe spectacular? Where's the innovation lie?
For sure. So I think what really changed things for us. So I mentioned earlier that like we were looking at this other shoe that they had gone and had basically copied in China, and it had some properties that we really liked. Like it was really low to the ground, super flexible, super grippy on the outsole, and the insole was kind of like a little bit bouncy, but really we wanted to explore a bit more how to push that innovation further. And so I had been really interested in this idea of proprioception and biofeedback as far back as at least when I was working at Reebok. I worked on like a passion project for like a soccer shoe that would keep your ankle from rolling, and found that proprioception would be the actually a useful tool in doing that. And so, and essentially all that means is like giving your foot more information.
Yeah.
So how do you give your foot more information? Like when you're barefoot, obviously your foot is picking up tons of information. We have all these nerve endings on the bottom of our foot.
Well, I was about to say, where I know the word proprioception from is at this course I took in high school at a university, and that was physical therapy, and they were talking about PNF, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. And so, tying into what you're saying, I'll let you take away with it, is, it's gathering that information typically through the nerves.
Yes. And so, and there's a reason our feet have all these nerve endings, is because like historically we've needed that to understand what's on our feet. We don't have eyes down there, so we need information getting sent up to our big old brain up here to let us know where we are in space and how to move and how to stay safe.
Yeah.
And so so kind of like keeping that in mind. And then also we had this idea of like, we really want the shoe to sort of be able to stretch out with your foot, right? Like
splay like your feet do. Yeah.
Splay like your feet. And so one of the issues with a lot of barefoot shoes is they end up looking kind of clowny because they're building this really wide toe box and wide shoe that sort of flops around. And so we said, well, why don't we try to find a way that the shoe actually moves with your foot and with the width of your foot, as opposed to just like creating this really wide thing. And so, and ironically, like one of the biggest like attacks on our brand is like, hey, your toe box is like too narrow or it doesn't have the right shape. It's like, well, yeah, like we kind of did that intentionally because for so many people, getting right into like the super wide looking shoe it's too far out of the like mental comfort zone of like, oh, I'm going to look good in this. And so our workaround was like, hey, well, let's make the shoe move with your foot. And so in order to do that, what we did is I looked at like what was happening in volleyball sleeves, like those pads on your knees.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
They've got those little hexagons.
The little
right?
hexagons, yeah.
And so we like actually just shrunk that down. I don't know if you can see it on the camera.
Yeah.
It goes.
I'll throw it up on the screen if they can. Yeah. But the bottom of this, the insole, but also the outer sole, the bottom sole.
Right.
You can correct me if I use the wrong term, but it's got a bunch of those little hexagon shapes all throughout.
Right. And so, and because it's between two layers of spandex, it creates this really interesting underfoot experience that I haven't experienced anywhere else. Most people I don't think have. And so that's one of the really like unique features is that the sole really does move more with your foot. And we were actually able to also add a little bit more padding in there without reducing the amount of biofeedback your foot is getting from the ground. So oftentimes the more padded it is, the further you are from that information, which is the ground. And so the less stable you feel. But by doing this, we actually solved the other problem, which is a lot of barefoot shoes, people can't walk in them very long.
Yeah, I want to dig into that, and maybe we can not rip on barefoot shoes, but there's this huge explosion, right, of people interested in barefoot shoes. And I think a lot of it is headed in the right direction, right? Like we don't need these amazingly like ultra cushioned shoes that are they don't even really look like they're accustomed to your foot and your anatomy. But to your point, a lot of the designs I feel like are somewhat lazy, right? There's these like wide toe boxes and with just a little bit of grip on the bottom, but there's not much to it. There's no structure. And okay, maybe for some people in the gym, I see it really popular with like deadlifts or squats. Like maybe you don't need a lot of function when you're in a very fixed position doing a specific movement where you don't need a lot of flexibility and support. But again, when you're talking about trying to make this more custom to most people, trying to make it versatile to where it can work in the gym but also be like a daily driver, you do need some support, some comfort, especially if you're coming from years of wearing cushioned shoes. To have no support, it's a big drastic change.
Right. Most people aren't ready to make that change right away. People get hurt doing that. And so especially if you go from like your big padded shoes to like literally nothing. Now, some people are barefoot a lot in their daily life and they don't have an issue with that transition because they've already been building up those muscles. But for the average person, and even just going and walking on concrete, if you're like going to go, if you need to go walk a mile or 2 miles or whatever on concrete, you're just standing around on a trade room floor or something all day, like your feet are going to get really fatigued. And actually, even with our shoes, which have essentially double the cushioning of most barefoot shoes, people still are like, hey, my feet are getting tired. So we've got a solution for that we can talk about later. But but it's like our goal again, like, is just giving people an easy entry point to health and wellness. And you don't have to go so extreme so fast. And a lot of people I've talked to are like, I tried barefoot shoes 10 years ago and then I got a fracture in my foot. And so I haven't worn them since. And so it's really like correcting the narrative and creating options for people to to take a step into foot health.
And you want something universal because, I mean, who wants to have to switch shoes leaving the gym to actually go into their job or this or that? Like, you want something universal. And, even it's not even like a fault of your shoe, but the material, the ground, the surface that you're standing on makes a huge difference. I mean, even if I wear my trail running shoes and I'm running on concrete, hurts my foot more than if I wear road running shoes that are made to, withstand asphalt or concrete a lot more.
Yeah, and sort of the project brief on this shoe, we approached it from a couple different ways, but an initial conversation we had was like, what is the yoga pant for your feet? What's the thing that you can wear to the gym, to the grocery store, at home, on a date?
the yoga pant for your feet. I like that.
Yeah, and like ironically now you have Lululemon making shoes, and I don't think they're the yoga pant for your feet, but like they look like decent shoes, but I don't think that that doesn't seem to be their project brief. And so it had to be something really universal and also perform. And so like I'll say of the shoe, it's our approach to it was, let's make something that can hit everything with about 80% effectiveness. So like I lift in these shoes, I run in these shoes, I do long hikes in these shoes. Don't trail run in them because I've bruised my feet doing that. But it really is something that can span the gamut. And then now we're also obviously making products that get a little bit more granular.
More specialty.
Yeah.
So I guess this is a good point to go into balancing aesthetics and performance, right? So you obviously have the technology and innovation built into like the sole and so forth, but how'd you go about, still making sure, this is something people want to wear, right? It looks good, it looks clean, because it is a very minimalist looking shoe at the same time.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's a part of me that really thinks that aesthetic is in part performance, because people are showing up to life to like, right, to look and feel great.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you show up to the gym in a shoe that like, you're like, this thing performs, but it looks ridiculous.
Yeah. It's like the whole like look good, feel good, and then perform good thing, right?
Right. And so, yeah, like if you're an elite athlete doing an elite sport, well, actually, like this still might be your gym shoe, and it is for a lot of them, but it's not going to be your game day shoe. And we understand that that's not our goal. Mm-hmm. Our goal is providing something that you can wear with your lifestyle, wear to the gym, perform in it. We kind of like, you're holding the high top. That was essentially geared around some market feedback that we got that, especially people that are in the CrossFit world. Maybe I have to bleep that out because I don't think that we can say CrossFit, but let's say.
Why can't we say CrossFit now?
Oh, CrossFit, man. I'm not going to get into it. They're very protective.
They are.
They are. The cross training industry.
Yeah.
So we found people that are really into functional movement and high intensity workouts.
More ankle support.
So it actually wasn't even ankle support.
Okay.
We already knew we wanted to do a high top, and obviously as a brand with like limited resources, we said, well, how do we hit our market as best as possible? And so one of the complaints on our original shoe for people who are doing certain lifts, or if they're pushing them in different ways, they wanted something that was a little bit more rugged. And so I said, like, okay, let's put some, like hot melt overlays. Let's make it out of a ripstop, so it's really durable. Mm-hmm. We've got the graphene version, which has got this, really fun durability story in the sole. And then obviously, because it's high top, it does lend itself more to the gym, heavy lifts. Power lifters have been using Converse for years as a, especially high tops.
Yeah.
So we wanted to kind of find that, and actually, we've been really, really happy to say that it's done really well. So
I was gonna say, this almost seems like a more modern, updated lifter shoe, right? Like a lot of people do grab to those Vans and Converse, which they still are in a cheaper price range. But one, these I think look aesthetically better than Chucks, and then two, those they don't last that long for the most part. People usually have to go through a couple rounds of them, And also, again, like whether it's the sole not splaying the same way you've added this innovation, but then also the upper, I think, just gets worn out. The laces get worn out. So this definitely seems like a more rugged, kind of updated, modern approach to a powerlifting shoe in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely the aim.
So one thing I want to touch on too is how you've innovated over time, because you talked about how you handled the customer service for a while and you were making a lot of those improvements. How has this shoe changed from day one launch to like now? What are some of those key changes you guys have made from, first order of product, first shipment coming in, and how they're going out now?
Yeah, so some things that we've actually changed on the shoe, that are already in production is having just like things internally where we filled things out a little bit to make the shoe a little bit more, like changing out foams so that it lasts longer, right? Like our initial
more longevity.
Initial foam that we used in there was like just it would peter out really quick. So a couple other things have been just actually it's all been like kind of under the surface. I mean, like stitching colors on the inside even. And then I've been doing a lot of like just experimenting on how to improve, and every time it's like you tweak one thing over here and then something over here, you end up losing functionality. And so
it all connects. Intertwines,
there's probably one or two more small changes that we'll make on the initial product, and then beyond that, it's going to be releasing new products that just are more specialized in other niches. Because what we're really finding is if we make many more changes to the existing product, it's going to lose some of its magic. And so, but yeah, it's really about kind of finding that balance
and fine tuning. Yeah. Another thing I want to touch on too, and you can talk about the importance of it, or at least how you guys view it, is the production process with, I know a lot of the material, right, is sustainability. It's recycled materials, right?
So actually not on the high top. We do have it on the low top.
And they're produced in South Korea, right?
So yes, well, initially yes. Now we're doing some of that production in Vietnam, and then we have some future products coming out of China as well. And so it's sustainability is one of those things that's near and dear to my heart. It's difficult to do as a young brand. And especially when you're trying to produce performance product, there's just some things that don't exist in certain products. And while recycling is a good story, it's not the whole story. Because even us just using recycled materials, it takes plastic bottles out of circulation. Or sometimes, I don't know exactly that process, but it could be taking plastic bottles out of circulation in the recycling process, and now it's in a shoe. Well, you can cut off the top of the shoe and probably go recycle it, but
how many people are going to do that, right?
Not a lot of people are going to do that, and so really, I think the future of sustainability is like shoes that are biodegradable, that sort of thing. But to do that, the development is still so early on some of those materials. And then also getting them to work with a brand our size. They want somebody who has a lot of resources already, and then those things trickle down to brands like ours. But yes, I think that is something that we're working on, developing those relationships, so that we can have the sustainability long term that we think is vital to the continuation of our species on this planet, right? So it is something that is top of mind.
Okay. Yeah. So let's dig into, I guess. Oh no, did you grab it from over here? You took the running shoe?
The running shoe. Here you go.
So let's, you can toss it. You can toss it. I'll catch it. So let's dig into this guy. So it was literally a question. I told you it was a question I had written down. I wanted to ask, what was next for Flux, whether it was a new product or certain innovations or different variances. But, you had it right there in the open is the running shoe. So tell us a little bit. You said it's launching. Is it in February? Or in March? Maybe March is a safer bet?
No, it's February. It's next month. They're supposed to come in on February 7th, but I don't...
To be determined.
To be determined.
Keep an eye out. But walk me through this running shoe. What was why did you guys create it, and how is this different? Because this looks more like a running shoe versus, obviously the original wasn't made to be a running shoe, but I'm wondering how you still kept it more minimal and how you still incorporated the innovation and like the like you said, the little kind of proprioceptive hexagons in here.
Yeah.
So take it away.
Sure. So early on, when we put it out to existing customers, what they'd want next from us, it was a running shoe. That was the top of the list. So we actually got a grant about a year and a half ago from the state of Nebraska. Thank you, Nebraska. That essentially paid my salary to go in and create this, while obviously also working on other parts of the business. But so the vision here and the opening in the market that we saw was in the zero drop wide toe box running market.
Yeah, there's not many.
There's not many, and of the ones that are there, none of them are a style that me or my team felt great about running in. And again, so where that fits sort of in our ethos is 90% of people who are running right now are running in, Brooks, Asics, Nike, Adidas, right? Okay, that are they've got a raised heel and a narrow toe, right? And so it's a big ask to say, go from that to running on a zero cushion flat sandal or something, right? And so our foray into that market of running is, let's give you something that's one step better. Because if you go 5 steps better, you might end up hurting yourself. And so that's where we see ourselves. And then we also just saw the market of like what has been taking off the past 10 years for Nike and Adidas is the athleisure market.
Well, and this looks stylish, and I can tell, and if you can't see in the video, it's basically it's a single knit construction. It looks like on the upper, which is stylish, but also looks pretty comfortable and breathable, especially if you are in a warmer climate, if you are running, keeping the foot cool. And also something I noticed, and we could have touched on too with the original product, was this foot shape, right, that you guys have. It kind of has this like curve to it that I imagine is more natural to the actual human foot.
Yeah, and so we kind of took a different approach than our trainer, where we said, like, let's actually build this out. Let's have the wider toe, because that's something people have been asking for. And especially when you're running, it's not, you don't need that lateral support that sometimes a slightly narrow toe box can offer.
That's a good point.
And so we really see this as like your daily wear, like
on the go
shoe. If you're running, like a couple miles a week, like this is just a great option. If you're traveling, right, it's gonna be really comfortable for whatever you're going through. It's definitely got more support than our trainer, right? It's and as a result, you can go a lot further with it. Right. So like we've got people who are on their feet all day, and for some of those people, the Adapt is great for them and it works perfectly. For some of them, they're like, I just need more support and more cushion. So for those customers, this is a great option. I personally love wearing them. I wear them everywhere. Easy to slip on, and just kind of, for me, are a really great jogger style. You
can trust him. No bias.
No bias. Well, I mean, I designed it. Like this was when given the opportunity to make a running shoe, for me, this is what I would want to wear. So
well, and I think it shows too that there's passion behind it. So like you truly stand by this and believe this, and we're excited to design it versus I'm sure a lot of that's not fair to call out like major brands like Nike and act like their designers don't care, but there's not as much, I guess, always going to be the passion behind, you are in the brand and making sure it's your absolute best, because there's going to be marketing behind it. There's already going to be a fan base that's already going to pre-order it or whatever. It's just a different feel. And so it's good to know that you've actually, you've put it through the ringer yourself, you've experienced it, and you wouldn't put out a product that you weren't proud of, right?
Totally. Yeah, and that's the difference too, like between working in a big brand is unless you're you could be the product marketer, but then you're just saying, well, there's a market fit here. And then you hand off the brief to the designer and the designer goes, okay, I'll design a shoe for that market. And sometimes it's something that you're excited about because it, fits in what you would wear personally. But a lot of times it's like, no, just design to the brief, design for the thing. But the approach on this is, well, design the shoe that we want to wear. And, so that's why it's so much easier to stand behind the work that I'm doing here than I have ever in my design career, because it's not just like, I really feel good about this for this community. It's like, no, I feel good about this for me. This is what I'm going to be wearing. Now, again, like, I'm not a marathon runner. If you're going to be running a marathon, maybe get something that's built for a marathon. But if you're running 5 miles and you're wearing this for your daily wear, like, I don't think there's a better option out there.
Yeah, well, there's still people that are, and you can argue with me or not you personally, but people on the interwebs. But yeah, there's people in the barefoot community, that kind of cult following, that will say that you could just like run like long distances in like barefoot shoes. I'm like, no, like that, especially when it comes to like, maybe they can,
and that's fine,
but,
right?
But when it comes to trail running and even like just long road running, like it is not for most people or for anyone really. It just doesn't sound like.
Long distance, I actually, you mentioned today that you did a 50 miler back in October. My 2 friends who did like 30 milers back in October, they both got injured, and they're both like made like runners. They're runners. So, and they're, and maybe the problem is that they're wearing normal shoes. Maybe they should have been out there in, the Terra Humera sandals, There's a time and place for that. But I think you really have to, you've got to work into these things. And if that's something that you really feel strongly about, go for it. Like, if you're a runner and you're like, I really want to, build up my feet to be running barefoot, find a way to do it. I'm all for it. But if you're like, hey, I don't quite have that amount of time, and I'm going to be honest with myself about that I don't have the time dedication or like the reward payoff to do all of that right now, cool. Like, find an option that's better for you though than what you're currently wearing.
At the end of the day, it's like you're not marketing these as it can do it all and it's perfect and it's for every special scenario. You're saying like, okay, this is a daily driver, it can carry most people, like you said, 80% of most areas, right? It can perform in most areas. And then for those people that do need, specific squat shoes, or they need specific shoes for CrossFit, they need specific shoes for ultra running, they can do that. But this is going to be something, like you said, that can be kind of athleisure, a do-it-all, universal kind of application. So what's next for Flux? So we touched on the running shoe. I don't know if you have some like broader aspirations or thoughts coming up, or colorways dropping. Like what are, I guess, future plans that you can kind of share, or things you'd like to see in the brand?
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned, like, right now we're a bit in a growth phase, so that's a lot of delegating and figuring out what that looks like. We're going to be meeting with my dad, who's a business coach, very soon to have him walk us through his framework to give us some really practical, help us get like really aligned on what the vision is. But off the top of my head, it is the sort of biohacking, cross training, either home gym or functional gym, man or woman who are just looking to better themselves. Like, any products we can make to help them in life, that's our goal. And so we do have a lot of new products sort of like in the works right now, and hopefully over the next year, 2 years, we'll be launching a lot more colorways, collaborations. We're talking with some of our influencers right now about like what we can do there, and obviously just extending our reach through social with influencers, guys like Eric, who you and I both know, who just have a really loyal following and
live
have, like,
and breathe it and use it. And
yes, that's it. So
well, I think that's a good way to do it too, especially as a startup. Is not just because you could have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, right, showing, I'm using it, but it's like when you actually have people using it on a daily basis and actually I think that is why the influencer market's growing a lot, because people, when they do advertise through influencers, and especially when it's people who actually use the product or stand behind whatever product or service it is, I think it draws more attention in an authentic way, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Trust is king.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So where can people find you specifically and Flux in general?
Flux, you can find us on our website, fluxfootwear.com, or social is flux_footwear. And then me, I'm Zachary Jordan Fry on Instagram.
Follow for the
I'm so bad at posting, so I try to I've been trying to do dumps every
yeah,
quarter just to
keep the people informed.
I don't know. I don't know who it's for anymore. It's for my
Yeah.
own entertainment at this
It's good
point.
to look back on.
But any posting any more than that is not entertaining for me. So
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Well, thank you again for coming on today, and it's really great to meet you. Hopefully, if we connect in the future, there's no tire issues. And
I appreciate. Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll be able to avoid it next time.
Yeah, but anyway, thank you guys for listening and or watching. And let me know if you like the 2-camera setup. Honestly, this is a different go at it. And share it if you found it interesting. And let us know what you think. And we'll catch you guys in the next one.